Hello, everyone, and welcome to Loving Out Loud, the video series of classes based on the book. This is chapter 1, titled Kristis Friend, Meaningful Words and a Hurtful Tongue. These series of classes will be based upon scriptural passages about loving one another and about the other ways that the Bible talks about how we should treat one another in love. It will be based on the scriptures, but it will also be based on real life examples from my own life. Examples where people showed me an extraordinary amount of love, perhaps beyond what I deserved, and also ways in which I blew it and failed to show that kind of love to someone else. The purpose is to give us tangible, real life examples so that we can more clearly apply the passages that we'll be looking at. My hope is that you will take those passages and then look for your own examples in your own life for how you might be able to apply them going forward. I hope you enjoy the class and the series of classes. This is chapter 1. There'll be 16 total classes. If you still need a book or a workbook, you can reach that through Amazon.com. Our theme scripture for this week's class is from Philippians chapter 2, verses 1 through 4. It says, "Therefore, if you have any encouragement from being united with Christ, if any comfort from his love, if any common sharing in the Spirit, if any tenderness and compassion, then make my joy complete by being like-minded, having the same love, being one in spirit and of one mind. Do nothing out of selfish ambition or vain conceit. Rather, in humility, value others above yourselves, not looking to your own interests, but each of you to the interests of others." I hope you'll really think about that passage. I don't know about you, but oftentimes when I read a spiritual enrichment book and it has passages written out, sometimes I skim right over those. But I'm going to ask you not to do that here, because we really have to understand the heart of these passages in order to really be able to apply them to our lives. Now, let me ask you a question. Would you like to have the ability to tie a string to your words sometimes so that after you say them, you could reel them back in if they were really stupid or hurtful or ignorant or whatever the descriptor may be? Would you like to have a verbal reset button? I know that in my life I've had many times where having the ability to pull the words back in before anybody heard them would have been very helpful. In fact, in trying to record this particular session, I've had to restart it 4 or 5 times, and I've still bumbled a few times that I'm letting pass. One time when I was a teenager, I was asked to lead the closing prayer. I can't remember if it was a Sunday night or a Wednesday night. I'm pretty sure it wasn't a Sunday morning, but I was asked to lead the closing prayer. And I walked up there all sure of myself and pleased as punch to be able to be asked. And I stood before the whole congregation and I looked out over the crowd and I said, "Please play with me." I didn't miss a beat. I just went right into the prayer, but boy, I wish I could have pulled those words back. Anyone who's ever spoken in public has said something stupid. It just comes with the territory. I had one not long ago where I was emceeing a panel discussion that was going to be broadcast live and recorded and put on a podcast. I wasn't yet live, but I was already mic'd up, so I was being piped out over the audience, and I said something trying to be funny, and it came off anything but. And people reacted in the audience, and I wished at that moment that I could pull those words back in. Funny thing is that the whole panel discussion and podcast was about controlling your words, learning to control your tongue. And I blew it before we even got started with the discussion. Sometimes I do wish pulling the words back in were as easy as hitting the reset button, not the reset button, but the backspace button on my laptop. But you know, words are a powerful thing. Words have consequences. I want you to think about that for a second. The words you say can have incredible consequences. I want you to think about some of the famous speeches and the famous orators of the world. Lincoln's Gettysburg Address, 5-minute speech, but one of the most powerful in our history. Martin Luther King Jr.'s I Have a Dream speech, one of many that he made, but this one seems to resound with so many people across all sorts of barriers and really is a life-changing speech. And then you have the negative. You have, let's say, Adolf Hitler's speeches in pre-war Germany that riled a country up and led to the deaths of millions and millions and millions of people. Words can be used for good or they can be used for bad. So now we get to the story of Kristis Friend, the example I'm going to use in this particular class. I was a senior in high school. Our youth group at church met on Monday nights for our Monday night fellowship. It happened for almost every Monday night. We would go to someone's house, one of the members' homes, and we would play games. Usually the guys were out playing football or basketball or something rowdy outside, maybe volleyball. We would have refreshments and snacks, and then we would sit down in a circle and we would sing songs and we would pray, and then Neil, our youth minister, would lead a devotional. It was one of those Monday nights. The Monday night fellowship was also the time when we often brought visitors. We brought our friends. It was a time when they could connect with our youth group without it needing to be at church, and it was a kind of an easy way to kind of introduce people to our group. And Kristis Friend was one of those kids. Kristi was the younger sister of my first girlfriend. That's all I'll tell you about her. But she was there with her friend. My first girlfriend was off at college. She had moved on away from our youth group and had moved to college, and I was there alone and probably was trying to be funny in a sort of a adolescent flirting kind of way, but it was really stupid. But Neil was leading a devotional, and I don't know what the devotional was about exactly, but he asked us at one point to look around the room, and the kids were arrayed in a big circle, and I'm sitting here, and Neil's to my left, and off to my right, about halfway around the circle, was Kristi, and just to her side was her friend. And Neil asked us to look around the room and find someone who we could share about some characteristic they have. And the idea was to be encouraging, to lift them up by saying something encouraging about them. And the thing you got to know about me is that I was basically insecure as a teenager. I was sensitive, I was insecure, and one of the ways that even though I was kind of looked on as a leader in the group, one of the ways that I gained approval and felt confidence is when I could get other people to laugh. And so sometimes I would pop a joke out, and the idea was really to bolster my own sense of security. And it was because of my insecurities that I did that. And I'm sure at times I was quite obnoxious, but at this point in time, I was completely out of line. I looked around that room looking for someone to say something encouraging about them, and I found Kristis Friend. And the thing you got to know about Kristis Friend is she's a sweet girl. She was cute. She was friendly. But she had one very prominent feature that was obvious to everyone, but everyone but me had the good sense to not comment about it. But I looked around the room and I found Kristis Friend, and in a loud voice in front of everyone, I said, "She's got a big nose." And I expected laughter for about half a second. That was how long it took Neil to connect what I'd said with his rebuke. And he he shouted at me and he said, "That was uncalled for. I don't want to ever hear you say something like that again." And he was completely right. I had trampled on a stranger for my own benefit. I never saw her again. I don't know if I apologized that night or not. I wish that I knew. I hope that I did, but I can tell you that after Neil let me have it, I withdrew. I pulled back. I was quiet the rest of the evening. I had nothing to say. I was hurt. I was in pain. And I would like to think that I went and apologized, but I don't know if I did, and if I wish I could now. But I never saw her again. And my words severed her potential relationship with both me and our youth group. And if you notice the scripture at the bottom of this page, it says, "Those who consider themselves religious and yet do not keep a tight rein on their tongues deceive themselves, and their religion is worthless." That's from James chapter 1, verse 26. I made my religion worthless that day because I did not keep a tight rein on my tongue. My need for approval, my need to soothe my insecurities, overrode my concern for someone else. Now, the thing I want to ask you, this is where we start to make some application, is how often do our flippant words disconnect people from our family of faith? Do we trade our relationships for the feeling of being right? That sense of needing to feel that security within ourselves. We want to be right. We want to make our point, and somehow we gain confidence. And in doing so, do we sometimes sever our relationships? Ephesians chapter 4, verse 29 says, "Do not let any unwholesome talk come out of your mouths, but only what's helpful for building others up, according to their needs, that it may benefit those who listen." When I pick up my phone these days and I scroll through social media, it's my meddling time. I see vulgar jokes. I see angry rants against public figures. We're going to talk more about that next week. I see hate speech against various groups. I see profanity-laced political rants from people in the church, folks that we worship with. It goes on and on and on. Many of those words are just really, really strong, strongly worded, very opinionated. But how many are meaningful and meant to build up rather than tear down? How many of our words on social media, or really in our day-to-day interactions for that matter these days, are meant to show God's love? I want you to think about the things you say. Are they meant to show God's love, or do they have some other purpose behind them? I want you to remember Philippians chapter 2, verses 3 and 4. "Do nothing out of selfish ambition or vain conceit. Rather, in humility, value others above yourselves, not looking to your own interests, but each of you to the interests of others." In the Bible, the word that is most commonly translated to the English word love is the Greek word agape. And agape is from the biblical definition, is a very unselfish love. It looks to the benefit of the other person. It ignores the needs and the benefit of the lover, and it looks to the interests and the needs of the lovee. Really, this passage in Philippians chapter 2, verses 3 and 4 are a great definition of that love. Doing nothing out of selfish ambition or vain conceit, but in humility, valuing others above ourselves, not looking to our own interests, but to the interests of the other person. Do that with your words, because your words have power. Your words matter. The world truly can be moved with strong, loving, meaningful words, yours and mine. Other people do it. Other people move the world with their words. You and I can do the same. It may start with the person next to us, the person that we work with, the person in our class, the person in our office, the person in our next cubicle, the person on the other side of the Zoom meeting that we're in. But our words can make a difference. Be mindful of your power, the power of agape love put into practice. We end each of these classes with a series of discussion questions. What I'm going to suggest is if you are doing this in a group, that you pause it at the end of each question. That I'm going to read the questions, pause it at the end of each question and discuss, and then go to the next. But I'm going to read those now. If you're all by yourself, I should say, just take the time to think through these questions. But if you're in a group, listen to one another, discuss it back and forth. Question number 1. Share about a time when you said something that you wished you could immediately reel back in. Number 2, can you think of a famous quote that has touched you in some personal way? Please share that. Or number 3, how have insecurities, either yours or someone else's, had an impact on your relationships? Number 4, take a moment and read Philippians 2, 1-4 again. How can this verse change the dynamic of our everyday interactions? If we really applied it, how would it change the dynamic? And then number 5, in light of, see, if you're going to speak publicly, you're going to say dumb things. I just did it again. So number 5, in light of Philippians 2, 1-4, and Ephesians 4:29, how should a Christian temper their words on social media sites? I'd like for you to think about that one. How should Christians temper their words on social media sites? I also end each class with a challenge. For the next week, this is your weekly challenge. For the next week, find someone to apologize to for something you should not have said. If you're anything like me, that won't be too hard to do. Also, go out of your way to say something encouraging to someone. Build someone up with your words. Practice what we talked about. Next week, we're going to take a look at Donnie, Marie, and LeBron. Real people, real words. I hope you have a great week, and we'll see you next time. Take care.